There is a moment in the Pimp Chronicles Part 1 that the recording captures and that most people who have watched the special have passed through without stopping. It lasts only a few seconds. It does not announce itself as significant. It arrives in the middle of a set that has been moving at a pace that makes pausing feel almost physically uncomfortable. A set built on speed and density and the specific forward momentum of a comedian who knows exactly where he is going and is moving there at the rate the material requires. And then, for a few seconds, the room goes quiet in a way it has not been quiet at any other point in the recording. The audience didn't leave. Nobody coughed. No external noise interrupted the taping. The silence was internal to the room, a collective suspension of response that the audience arrived at without being asked to, and that the recording catches in the particular way that well-produced comedy tapings catch the sound of a room that has stopped doing what it came to do. To understand what produced that silence, it helps to understand what the Pimp Chronicles Part 1 was, what it was designed to do, what it actually did, and why the specific moment in the middle of it that the audience went quiet turned out to be the moment that the special became something more than its own best version of itself. The Pimp Chronicles Part 1 was released in 2006, and it arrived at a specific moment in the trajectory of Katt Williams's career. The moment when the voice that had been developing for years in circuit rooms began to reach the larger audience that television distribution makes possible. It was not the beginning of that voice. The voice had been present and developing for years before the cameras recorded it. But it was the recording that made the voice available to people who had not been in the rooms where it had been formed. The silence that followed the transition was not the silence of an audience that didn't understand what it had just heard. It was the silence of an audience that understood it too well. The recognition that the bit had moved into territory that the previous 45 minutes had not prepared them for. That what was being said from the stage was something that required them, briefly, to stop performing the role of a comedy audience and simply be people receiving something that was aimed at them personally rather than generally. That kind of silence is the rarest thing a stand-up performance can produce. A laugh is easy. Not easy to earn, not easy to produce, but easy to understand once it happens. A laugh means the audience found something funny. A silence of the kind that the Pimp Chronicles produced at that particular moment means something more complicated and more difficult to name. That the audience found something true, something that required a different response than laughter, or that required the audience to move through the truth of it before the laughter could come. What Katt Williams did in those seconds, in the silence that the transition had produced, with the cameras running and the audience suspended in their response, is the thing that the people who were in the taping have described most consistently in the years since. He did not rush through it. He did not perform his own awareness of the silence in the way that comedians sometimes perform their awareness of a moment that isn't going as expected. He occupied it. He stood in the silence and let it be what it was, the room's honest response to something honest, and he waited for it to resolve itself on its own terms. When it resolved, when the laughter came, as laughter always eventually comes when the truth underneath it has been given the space it requires, the quality of the laugh was different from any laugh that had preceded it in the set. Fuller, more open. The particular laughter of an audience that has been asked to feel something before being given permission to find it funny, and that finds, once the permission arrives, that the feeling has made the funny part funnier than it could otherwise have been. A stand-up special is a different object from a stand-up performance. A performance is live and unrepeatable. It exists in a room for the people who are in the room, and what it produces in those people is the only record of what it was. A special is a recording. It is edited, color-corrected, mixed, distributed. It becomes a fixed version of something that was, in the room where it was taped, still alive and variable. The relationship between the special and the performance is always a relationship between the fixed and the living, and the fixed version always loses something that the living version had. What the Pimp Chronicles Part 1 kept, what the recording preserved, was a set that operated at a level of internal consistency that the fixed format could carry without losing the essential quality of it. The perspective was so specific, the language so precise, the rhythm so entirely its own that the recording could hold it without the recording becoming the thing rather than the documentation of the thing. Most comedy specials become their own subject once recorded. The Pimp Chronicles remained the set's subject, which is rare. The architecture of the special built toward its own high points in a way that the audience in the taping could feel. The accumulation of momentum that the set's structure produced as it moved through its material, each bit building on what preceded it, the rhythm of the whole creating a forward pressure that made the room's energy rise as the set advanced. And then, in the middle of that forward pressure, at a moment when the room's energy was at the level where an audience that has been fully inside a comedy set reaches the peak of its own responsiveness, the register changed. Not the bit, not the topic, the register. The comedian who had been moving through the room at the speed the material required turned, in a single transition, toward something that required a different speed. Something that was still funny, but funny in the way that things are funny when they are also true in a way that the audience recognizes from somewhere deep and private and not previously accessed in the course of an evening spent in a comedy club. The reason most people who have watched the Pimp Chronicles Part 1 have passed through that moment without stopping is the same reason that most audiences pass through the most important moments of most performances without fully registering them. The moment doesn't announce itself. It doesn't have the formal quality of a designated highlight. It doesn't arrive with a musical sting or a special lighting change, or any of the other signals that produced entertainment uses to tell an audience that something significant is happening. It simply happens. And then it's over, and the set continues, and the forward momentum resumes. But the set that resumes after the silence is different from the set that preceded it. The audience has been somewhere different and has come back. The comedian has shown them something that the preceding 45 minutes were, in retrospect, building toward. And the material that follows the silence, the final section of the set, the material that closes the evening, lands in a room that has been changed by what it experienced in those few quiet seconds. The Pimp Chronicles Part 1 is remembered as a great stand-up special. It is discussed in terms of the consistency of the material, the precision of the voice, the specific qualities of the performance that make it worth returning to years after its initial release. What is rarely discussed is the few seconds in the middle of it where the room went quiet, where the comedian moved from performing comedy to saying something true, and where the audience responded to the truth before they responded to the funny. Those seconds are the pivot point the entire special was built around. Not because they were planned as a pivot point. No stand-up set is built around a planned moment of genuine silence. But because what they produced in the room turned out to be the thing that elevated the special from very good to something that the people who were in the taping still talk about. The silence in the middle of the Pimp Chronicles lasted only seconds. It was the most important part of the night.